Sejam bem-vindos à Tech Session.
Welcome to Tech Session, the Phygital World in the Industry, where we are here to debate the importance of the phygital strategy as a way to fill the gap between the physical and digital world. For the opening of this session, I would like to invite the Mayor of Aveiro, José Ribau Esteves. Please come on stage, bringing Madam Secretary of State of Tourism, Commerce and Services, Rita Marques. We will now give the floor to the Mayor. Good afternoon. Let's sit, so because you're sitting, we'll sit also. Do allow me to give my greetings to the Secretary of State. Thank you for coming. Although, once in a while, she was too fast, so she had very important items in her agenda, so she came to the opening, not the closing. It's of no importance because you being here is so relevant that opening, closing, we're happy with both things. She was very important because she was on that irrelevant field of the Portuguese economy, which is tourism, and now she also has commerce and services. When we wrote industry in this conference, it's not to be taken literally. We chose one so that it can be everything that it's economic activity, commerce and services in a very specific manner. Thank you for coming, for everything that you have done. Always as a team, always ready. And for us, it is very important that governors are here. And I hope that many examples follow yours, because we need people in governing positions to face the challenges of what we are experiencing today. A very special greeting to my colleague, Pedro Machado, from the Tourism of Center, Portugal, and also the Secretary of State, giving an importance to Serra da Estrela. They are aware that the true star of the Portuguese reality is Aveiro. This morning we had the opening session, and I just have 2 or 3 remarks. In terms of bringing this to one of the conferences, we have many that this week we will experience, especially because of this process, that some think that the godfather was COVID, because it is the importance became greater, because it was not yet before COVID came about, of us being connected, what we want to come to our life in a physical manner, the things, let's call it like this, that we will have, the services that we wish to use, and that we can use platforms that are not material, that are digital, and that allow us to access with formats that are simple to what is the array of the access to enjoy. Either we're talking about services or processes of industrial production. So that was one of the things presiding to this thinking, to this sharing of experiences. Let me thank our speakers for the experience that they are bringing to us of a vast wealth, also to stimulate and to help us to open our vision, our fields of work. It's always one of the things that we wish to attain with this kind of debate, is to open horizons to each other so that we can have more capacity to be ambitious, to do better. What we do well, sure, but with the certainty that we can improve. I always say that it's always possible to do better so that we can enjoy life in the most competent manner possible. In the multiple projects that we are developing in the city of Aveiro, and with the complexity and determination that we will get to where we want to stand, that is an integrated offer of the multiple services that the city provides to citizens, some quite former, the others are newcomers, as for example our Burgues, which is a bike, or a set of services from our library and the archive, which will have a website to provide all its body of work. So it's hundreds of operations that we will place in the integrated platform with an access card with that, but it's always important of a financial the financial tramitation, which is, for example, VAT, because one of the things that we get is that it's easier to pay taxes. So honoring the country so that our contribution is transformed in the benefit of public service to all, we always get this cause in this provision that we have been putting together, our technical team, led by our Chief of Division, André Sester Costa, and the team and a vast set of partners that are always involved in this kind of process, just to share just one of the many examples that we are working on. So within this framework of living in the world, anticipating with the quality of the world where we live, that we had this idea of getting this conference, of inviting a set of people who are sharing all of these things with us in this contribution, so that we can follow through this path of empowerment. With this word that doesn't have a lot of sense. I had a class 1 hour and a half about what Phygital meant, but I did understand this word, this new word that one day will become part of the dictionary of the common practices of the Portuguese lexicon, with its Anglo-Saxon nuances that makes it more international. We know that the UK left the EU, but English stayed. I think it's unfortunate. French is much more elegant, but the internationalization of the Union itself leaves us to the we still have the English. That's what it means to have a global village. So we decided that our working language in our global village will be English. So it's very useful to have English words to understand some of the new concepts. I would like to bring on stage to give the floor to the Secretary of State of Tourism, Commerce and Services. Thank you. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I am always adapting to change, and I enjoy when others do too. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the breaching protocol, but I was always certain that you were here to help. So let me greet you. I think that we have many things in common. I think that we are here to draw bridges, to build the future. So congratulations for that vision and for putting together these events that seem important as public policy to instigate thinking clearly about the future, to join us So congratulations to all and to the team organized in this event, because as I was saying, we need to have some boldness, some vision, and some British terminology, or not that British, but that can bring us to the new world. We have other common things. We spoke about football, and we're talking about engineering, taking into account that I have that DNA because that's my training. Talking about other things and thanking you for what brought me here. Let me greet everyone here, the mayor, and the speakers who are about to share their expertise with us. And what I would like to share is 2 or 3 things, and let me also greet the President of Tourism of Portugal, Central Region, Pedro. Pleasure to have you. Because tourism of Portugal, or tourism in Portugal, has a decentralized model in terms of governance, Secretary of State, Commerce and Services. Tourism of Portugal, and we have this broadening of services. It's almost a regionalization. So let me greet you all of you who work with us every day, and those who take care of the specificities of the territory. So, coming back to what I had to share with you, although I'm the Secretary of State, there is a spirit of humbleness, trying to understand how technology can come to us. So the way that we do it with us, with the industry, is pivotal. These are times of change as a result of the pandemic, and we need to evolve. Digitization, technology as tools for digitization, for a better connection with the client, better indexes of invoicing, better indexes in provided services, to make sure that there is a great loyalty of clients. So that is why we have always been paying a lot of attention to development of technology, and this event is pivotal because it will be a screening of different trends and the new fronts that we need to take care of. One other thing, we have been investing a lot in qualified entrepreneurship. We have been working in tourism where we have programs of empowerment where we invite young people who want to be entrepreneurs, that want to discuss disruptive solutions that sooner or later might become part of the value chain, developing sustainable business models. So we invest every year to bring a network of incubators, of accelerators working on these systems. But that's not the only thing we do. We work with venture capital, and we invest seed capital in ideas that might be interesting. We are paying attention to new trends, sure. We need them to have the idea that there will be a healthy development of services and commerce. But we will try to use the tools that we have in terms of the funding of programs for incubators, for acceleration, but we also involve the market in the world of entrepreneurship by investing in investment funds, being participants of investment funds that then will invest in startups to nurture this challenge. This makes sense to us. I hope it makes sense to you also, because if there is no initiative from entrepreneurs or companies who are more or less install the so-called incumbents, creating new business models, creating new spin-offs, we are also paying attention to that trend. This only makes sense if this works both ways. This was the message that I had to share with you. Some humility, not just to learn from you, but this availability also. And any suggestions on any other tools that might be operationalized in a sense of making sure that we build this brave new world, here will be to create in terms of the need that you might come to identify. These are my messages. I hope that the session is fruitful for all. I hope to meet you soon in a moment of success for all of you. Thank you. For our debate session, we would like to bring on stage Luís Pedro Carvalho. He's a journalist of Jornal de Notícias, and the speakers Hugo Barbosa from Renault Portugal, Rita Bastos, she's a marketing director of SAINT-GOBAIN, Sílvio Meira, founder and president of the board of Porto Digital Brazil, and Pedro Carvalho, coordinator of the research ecosystem of Altice Labs. Good afternoon. Let me start by inspiring myself on the words of the mayor. This concept of Phygital started with COVID-19. It didn't. But even so, maybe that's where we all became aware of this reality. Not with a concept, sure, but we had to use it in a practical manner. I would like to know, I don't know who wishes to start, but how did the pandemic accelerate the process of digitization and connection of the digital world to the physical purchases? I don't know who wants to go first. Good afternoon, Rita Bastos. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here. The needs were there, okay? Of course, that the pandemic came to accelerate. We had to react quickly. Usually when we have an accelerator, we need to react, okay? So a lot of things had to be thought over in a very quick manner so that we could go to our clients to accelerate processes, to communicate. We did a lot of things, digital things, but that was not a priority. And I think that was the change. It became the priority. How to have meetings with quality, how to communicate with clients, how to place orders, how to make events, and how will the industry work digitally. Making sure that clients are getting their own development. The roadmaps for companies had already been designed, so we all had to be much more agile. It's something that we talk about a lot. Even those who are not aware of the concept had to adapt quickly. In the case of Renault Portugal at SAINT-GOBAIN, we have a connection with the industry, with professional clients. In Renault Portugal, how was it? How was it to sell cars digitally, virtually? Good afternoon, I'm Hugo Barbosa. I'm the Communication Director of Renault Portugal. Similarly to what the previous speaker was saying, we were also feeling that the client, our relationship of direct selling to clients, we felt that it was very digital, converting some of the most traditional clients. We already had some stats that our client would come 1.2 times in our sales facilities when they bought a car. 1.2 times. That's it. In our showroom. Well, the connection between a client or a seller could be via WhatsApp, for example. And I do remember in 2 minutes, in 54 seconds, the client said, okay, I'll meet you. But that is part of the process was digital, closing the deal, signing the contract. It's still a physical thing, sure. But we feel there is a brand which is Tesla. No one saw a showroom by Tesla. They sell a lot of cars, but they created that trend that the client from Tesla only does business online, strengthening the safety of our country. And it's the strongest of the country, our network. We do believe at Renault that we'll still have the system of bringing the car physically to the workshop. How many of us will buy a car 40 or 50,000 euros without touching it, without feeling the car? So I think that in our area the transformation has been happening, sure, and even on cars, but the connection between the manufacturer and the end customer, well, it's digital, but, well, I don't want to say never, but it will be a while until it is 100% digital. Is there a resistance of a client or your partners in the different areas? People still prefer to have an in-person meeting, or do you think that there are certain things that are digital and there is no way around it? Well, there was a transition in our business. We had Teams before that we started using, but in 1 week everything started working on Teams, and we never went back. In terms of the impact of the business, in B2B it was not that big, but in B2C we had to transform processes and systems. People started buying digitally. The type of business of Altice, it's a company that's with whom everyone needs to connect to. How were you able to reach those clients that senior citizens, for example, those who are less than agile with technology? Did you find some constraints? Yes, that's one of the issues with Phygital. Everyone thinks that digital is very nice, but you know that we have to take care of seniors. We need to have physical alternative channels. In the example of Altice, what we do is that we have a network that in companies end up doing the last mile. That's very hard. People who are not buying a service, a cell phone, or something else online. Sílvio, we are here sharing some of the experiences in Portugal. How was it? How was it on the other side of the ocean in Brazil? Hello. Sorry, because my Portuguese is not that good. My my Portuguese is not as beautiful as yours. Before answering your question, I think that the phygital area, it's not the disappearance of the physical part, is the making it bigger and how it articulates in terms of the plan because of the connections, interactions of the social realm. Phygital would be like an area of areas, given the dimension of the three physical dimensions that we can build with the same word. It's F for physical, G from digit, and the R is social. This is a field where we don't have channels. The notion of omni-channel disappears. You have flows, and those flows need to articulate between the areas. So, in terms of Brazil, we have kind of a paradigm of quality when we compare it with Altistas in Portugal, where you call to you call someone and they give you a protocol number, 400 digits, I don't know, 027 in the dictionary, and Huawei's dictionary. So then, when it returns in any other ways, you need to know the number of the protocol. And it's of no use because you will give them the number and they will start everything from scratch again. So to articulate performances in an area where we have systems, legacy systems to answer people in organizations that come before social media, these are new things if we think about it. The way that we have social media as entities, smartphones, not the cell phone, but the smartphone. 2007, okay? Those who don't have systems for this have a severe problem because it's not easy to redefine it. Systems are expensive. There is an assessment done by Rabobank in the Netherlands. A line of code working in the financial system, it's worth $1,000. And some information systems have millions of lines. And you won't spend any money if you already have line codes or coded lines. Well, Brazil has 81% of people with above 10 with a smartphone. So it's kind of almost universalization of smartphones. My city, Recife, we had the scheduling with a precision of people taking the 4 doses of the vaccine. I took the 4 vaccines in 5 minutes before or after the scheduled hour online, and that was mandatory for the entire population. The way it worked is those who did not have access because 19 that the 3 operators were able to fully answer. There was no problems. There was no limit of connections. We did a power up of the connection. I think that the three operators did. But the Portuguese network is quite good. It's quite good. Most of our network is fiber optics. We have many countries in Europe that don't have the same network because copper networks are very problematic. Everyone knows this. Altice is constantly developing new technologies for companies. 5G. Is 5G now bringing energy to this new stage? Well, 5G is a very transformative technology. It transforms the structure of the network, something that you cannot see, but it brings business models, namely in Phygital, that were not possible before. And the impact ends up being in the industry. 5G allows models of sensory. Imagine a warehouse filled with molds, and the system knows where the mold is. So in real time, they can have models called the digital ones of industrial process or industrial marketing, on which we can act upon. 5G is quite transformative. On a personal note, let me mention, for example, augmented or virtual reality with real-time interaction. So phygital models will be quite more sophisticated. It's what we call the metaverse, where people have a virtual presence in the virtual world also. But the greatest impact will be on the industry, no doubt about it. What about the experience with consumer or production? How the technology optimized and facilitated our production? We were saying that you said in each 54 seconds there's that's it. Every 54 seconds a car is ready to sell. So this can only be possible with 5G. Specifically because, just to give you an idea, when you go to a car dealer and you want to place an order, you automatically get to the factory that order with a reference. It doesn't have 400 digits, but it's 21 or 23, which is the engine number. And then from there on, there is an order that goes to the assembly line. People, because of the problem of the crisis of car parts, because digitization is not just good things, and we have suffered a lot with that problem, but people find it difficult to understand why car brands don't have car stocks. Well, if we think about it, it's easy to understand. Cars today are customized to such an extent that sometimes I need a certain finish, a certain rim, certain paint job, 360 cameras, making it that each car is their car. So this means that when we place an order, immediately we get the production order with all the traits that the client has chosen in the showroom. It's like having an assembly line, 3 or 4 different models with 520 different configurations being completed simultaneously, and that's only possible thanks to 5G, because data is different. In our industry, we talk a lot about the future that is still far, but we've heard of it. For example, of autonomous driving, and that will only be possible thanks to 5G, because it allows for a set of things that the technologies that we have today were not possible. I think that the improvement has to do with managing. That was the greatest change increasing number of references that we have integrated, and have a lot more references where they are, answering in a much more agile manner. I think that was the main thing. It's much more the management of references, of localization, but it had a huge impact, it did. There still is a long way to go, because the agility of processes is very important, but the greatest impact lies there, in the ability to manage everything that we have at hand, a lot of references, different sizes, so to find something very small in the warehouse. That is one of the examples. I think that was the greatest change, the greatest improvement. Can we measure the value that this brings to companies? Is it agility? Is it less labor? Well, in a direct manner, we can manage what we bring to market, immediately reacting to what they want in a much swifter manner, knowing how to better manage stocks than what we have. And in our warehouses before, we only had what we did. Now with information systems, it's much easier to have everything we do, to manage the area, and to be much more agile. So agility, yes, sure, but it's not just that. This can be translated in having everything they need in a much quicker manner. So everything that gets behind in the value chain goes above it. It's possible to see what we sell based on the management of all our references. Anyone wants to add something? Is there anything that we expect by the GSM Association? It's a global association in that I would say of the, well, I don't want to say bosses, but the heads of technologies, that has an impact of 5G per year is 13.5 billion per year. The GDP of Europe is 17.8 billion. So we are talking about destroying and create kind of an economy, on the economy of Europe per year. 40% of that impact we expect to be in the industry. And I think that the main impact will be the transformation of products and services. When we realize that everything connected means almost all as a service, this means basically that the car or the refrigerator or the car or the door lock is not a product, it's a service. This has a lot of implications. If you're talking about the door lock, it's a technology that is 2000 years old, and the review, which is the one that we use, has 150 years of age. It's from 1870. So we are tampering with structures of business, with productive parts, with value chains that are stable. 1.5 centuries, 2 centuries, the notion of ownership can change completely. I still see ahead a universe of destruction, like the GMC Association states, of 10 to more, I think it will be more actually, 10 to more than $10 trillion a year. We are talking about cars, services, and not, as it seems to have different things that are shared. Is that it? There are cases where things are of shared services, yes. Well, I'm a member of the board of a real estate building, which is MRV from Belo Horizonte. They build buildings throughout the world and the United States. At MRV, we have an operation called Lugo, which is housing or dwellings as a service. So you can design or to have sensors, have an apartment in the machinery, because people, it's harder for you to destroying a wall than a refrigerator. So Lugo has an operation in Brazil that is quite significant in terms of results, that it's not for rental, it's an apartment. So if you go to a Lugo, you hire it, you do it literally in the digital format, and then after 6 months you can change whenever you want, living in different cities, living in the same city, increase, decrease the point of view of the number of rooms, creating a connection of service. And it was just a builder who sold the partners, the contractors. So on the one hand, you have those who are used to build buildings to be sold. On the other, you have people who don't want to own an apartment. They want the flexibility of deciding where will they live according to the year or according to the season. If it's raining, you don't want to be on the beach. If it's sunny, you want to be on the beach. So this is something that it's defined, and we are talking about apartments. When you go for in terms of mobility, when you talk about cars and this, I think that transforming everything, it's like we have the signature of a shampoo, and every month there we get a package of 200 milliliters of shampoo. But you don't need to have it computerized, but I have a scale connected, and as it ends, I will get more shampoo, but only if I use it. It's a smart signature. I don't need to do anything. Not because there is a ritual of getting shampoo, but because I need more. That changes the dynamic of things in all sectors of the market. I do believe that there is a resistance of the public because people are used to have things and to have their own routines, their rituals. Buying the shampoo, for example, is a ritual. Is there a resistance in terms of this type of innovation? So, is it in the next generation that this kind of services will become usual, or are we talking about changing routines that were already implemented? Like you said, that a door lock is 150 years. Well, if you want to start with me, I have no idea. But maybe people, not only oldest people, are used to do things so that they didn't do before. But we need to see that there is, for example, a generation that started playing video games, and they were born playing video games. They are 40 now, okay? Just to make sure that we are in the same page. Games like Mortal Kombat were launched 30 years ago. Pac-Man was launched in 82. So there are generations that came before the internet that were born digital. So no problem with that for them. And they were never the owners of the machine to play Mortal Kombat or Pac-Man. The best selling game, 350,000, $14 billion total. We won't have that problem anymore soon, quite soon, especially because of the acceleration of the pandemic. Hugo. Well, in the car industry, and our world CEO, Luca Di Meo, in 2020, when he presented the strategic plan, he said it will become a revolution for the next few years. He had said something that's quite peculiar, which was he said that Renault will become a technology company that will also build cars. It's a vision of the future, saying that the future is digital. Because the first smartphones, I have a 15-year-old son, and he could not imagine that there would be any other type of devices because he was born doing this, and all this generation is already here. In the area of gaming, it's an area where I have some connection, and we've seen that the development, all the paradigms that in our generation were unthinkable at that time. I was kind of teasing. There was an image that this transition is accelerated. For example, Novak Djokovic, everyone knows who he is. In 2019, won Wimbledon, and the financial award was 2.65 million euros. But there was a kid who won the Fortnite World Cup. It's a video game, and he was paid $3 million. So this transition is as quick as this. It's something that we cannot imagine, but it's a fact. For us, it's inconceivable to share a car. For the coming generations, and this is something that if you tell me this, I will say that it's a lie. I won't pay 40,000 euros for a car that I use twice a day. No, makes no sense. So all this conception that we have, the mundane idea, will necessarily change quickly, much quicker than we can imagine. I'm sure you're aware of this. Last week we had a paddle tournament, and we ended, and we were just there talking. And we had interns, and they would talk to us in an informal manner, as if we were colleagues. And we thought 10 years ago this was unthinkable. The CEO, if he came to me, I would be afraid that he would talk to me. But now this transition is very quick. We are not realizing it, but it is in our homes every day. As Luis from Altice was saying, because of what our parents were, our grandparents, they are needing our help because there is no other way of doing things. It's the digital. But it's weird, this brave new world becomes strange, I know, but we need to adapt. We need to adapt. This generation, it makes no sense to have a house, they share a house. It makes no sense to have a car, they share a car. It's a world of services. Phygital, this issue of sharing is connected to digital services. I think that is actually the reality. Yes, and just a second, what you were saying, more than just we having to do something to accelerate, that will happen naturally because of everything that we were mentioning. The way will be that generations who are coming about have this in them. So we must adjust, sure, but it's something that is natural, something that just happens. Trying to assess the future, and in 10, 20 years, what can we expect in terms of great innovations? Are there paths defined? Are there ideas on how things can go, how the digital and physical will connect? Well, I would say that in terms of personal business and the subject of live shopping or live commerce will be the most important one. In terms of e-commerce, is that we have the possibility of interacting one-on-one with a seller that explains what we want to buy. For example, to try clothes, trying to talk to an influencer who tells us that it's good, it's bad, or in a user group where people debate the experience that they have with a product, and creating an avatar, or purchasing not just for home that will then be delivered, but Gucci launched, for example, uh, sneakers for avatars. So in terms of the industry, I think that that's the subject of the digital twin that will evolve a lot. Digital twin allows us to act upon the physical. It's not just the physical with the protection for the digital, but the digital over the physical also. I'm thinking about an example. A lot of digital models that have the idea of the containers with the cargo where they stand. And many things are independent or semi-independent. So it does not mean that this is a digital in terms of changing containers from here to there. So I think that in the industries, this issue of the digital and the physical will get mixed a lot. These are some of the things that I think will happen in the future. Anyone else has any idea? Well, I always say that if I could define what will happen next, I will be rich. But basically the trend is that what Luis was saying, in the car industry, and we have a paradigm in Portugal that unfortunately the average of our cars is 14 years of age. If someone who drives a 14-year-old car and sits in a new car will think that they are in a spaceship. So if you get to a Renault I-Tech, for example, and can command the car by voice, I'm cold, I'm hot, and the car automatically manages all of that. Well, for those who has a car with 14, 15 years of age, that is unthinkable. But it leads us to a way that is the car being seen just as a commodity. So last week I was in Madrid presenting one of our new cars. It's the Renault Austral, and I was with our connected services and connected systems, and I was asking her, how do you see the future? What will make us different? Because cars, according to a prerogative of the EU in 2035, will be electric, so they are silent, they are comfortable. Many of them have autonomous systems, different ways. So why is it that it's different to drive a Ferrari and a Renault? Premium brands, we also had this idea, but in the future they are almost all the same, because this component of a car limits itself to the aesthetics. Because I'm not an engineer, okay? But it's much easier to get power in an e-vehicle than in a combustion engine car. So this will makes it easier and makes us have a different experience, because this system of infotainment means that it's like Android. It's not Android Auto, okay? It's the system of the car. It's the Google Assistant. And for example, talking about an electric car, we'll have YouTube on board. If I'm charging my car, I'll be 30 minutes waiting. Maybe I will see a TV show on Netflix. It's a time to do that. Or either I will be connected with my company working in the car in a comfortable fashion. This goes around services. That's what makes us different. And think that the future, like Sylvia was saying, will be many services. We will select services for everything in our lives. We do it for houses, so we will do it for everything else. Let me add something. I think that within the context of the real estate construction area, we're still a long way to go. It's a sector that it's very traditional, and I think that throughout the value chain we have a lot to digitize. We know that this will reach the experience starting with projects of architecture. They need to go from 2D to 3D. It's something that is very important. There's not a lot of them, and it's not to be 3D because we will go something that we cannot visualize, but everything it means in terms of cost control and everything that it means in terms of maintenance. I don't know if you're aware of any work that there was a budget and it was paid actually that budget. No, of course not. This happens everywhere because this brings a lot of issues then to visualize. And technology can bring a lot of these definitions to see a house in 2D or 3D and going around it. I think that's something that we all want. And with the scarcity, if want to buy a house that is in the project, I wanted to see a 2D blueprint that doesn't give me a lot of information, right? So this is deeply connected. In the pandemic, it's something that had access to. They wanted to sell houses, so being able to show houses in real time, not in 3D but in videos with details, that it's much easier. And then the experience, the purchasing experience of materials, for example. So we are still getting started. We are still getting started. I'm talking about architecture, I'm talking about construction, visualization. There is still a long way to go. It's an area in terms of construction, in architecture, that has beauty because of the aesthetics. It needs to evolve to become more effective. Digitization needs to become part of the offices and to do its job in terms of industrialization of the manufacturing. What happens today, we don't have to be afraid of not having work. I think that we have scarcity of labor, and sometimes we don't want people to do something that it's hard, that it's demanding, that we can make it easier with robots. 3D, it's a reality. Industrialization, manufacturing, modular construction outside of that part in things that are simple. If I can industrialize parts of the process of people that don't need to be on the rain and depending on the time to move forward. I think these are a lot of ideas possible to fulfill because we are left behind, but changing the mindset, I think it's very important because of the audience who works in the context of construction is older and the mindset change is much, much slower. This is all quite interesting. Well, I'm a computer scientist by accident because usually I would be an electronic engineer. But when you assess from the point of view of the computer, everything is code. Amazing as it might seem, the universe is a machine that is distributed, computing its next state. But let me go to what you asked. The next 10, 20 years, what will happen? Well, what we might say is that everything that we see in terms of computers, like this smartphone, is code on a platform, a silicon platform. The five of us sitting here in these chairs, talking to those who are here, we are code on a carbon platform. Okay, so if we see how long it takes for us as humanity to start doing things, it took us 70 years since the 30s, it is when we discovered the fundamental theories of computing, to have a real impact on society. 1930 to 2000. There was no impact at that time that we see today. No tools like these ones. not a lot of computing in society. The impact of the internet starts after 2005. So it's 70 years with this wave of innovation transforming into a revolution, a social revolution of the business. If we were to measure it, coming from defining the structure of DNA from 53 by Watson Crick, those 70 years, will be next year. We will see the impact of that determination of DNA that brought to the sequencing of the human genome, that there will be a change on how we write code. And I think that we will start to write code about life. Last year in Japan, there was a DNA edited tomato. It's not transgenic, okay? That's not it. So talking about a tomato that is edited to be with a factor of genetic on a tomato that has a substance called GABA that reduces blood pressure. You buy a tomato, it's the same thing as taking a pill to mitigate or to decrease blood pressure. So it's treatment by food. When we think about the possibilities, and there is a soy that is genetically edited to be resistant to a certain type of pest without pesticides, the only idea of possibilities that we have to discover things who are connected to health, to food, that are connected to the balance of the genetic code, it shows that it's been helped by digital code, which are machines in the types of that is only understood in the middle of it. It's as we were starting the beginning of internet. There is a revolution of code about life, and that's what will have an impact, a socio-economic radical impact in the next 20 years. That's a given. It will disappear. This is a part that it's almost intrinsic of the society of economy as electricity. There is not a lot of debate on how electricity works, if we should have it or not. What will be the next wave? That does not exist. You get to the two interrupter, you just turn it on and you have light. No debate about electricity. And I think that we are coming to that point about computers, about technologies of information, about how they work in terms of silicon or silicium, and we will be studying DNA, RNA for the next 20 years. I just want to say that we debate a lot about electricity here in Portugal. I'm aware. But that's a geopolitical situation. The energy crisis might foster new advances. I mean, we need to save energy, we need to have more green technology, we need to avoid commuting, we need to be more environmentally friendly, to save energy in order not to have to sell our car in our house just to pay the electricity bill. All of this might come to foster new ways of doing things, right? Let me just say one thing. I have family in California, in the US. I don't know if you're aware. It's one of the most advanced states in the usage of electric cars. So they are forbidden to charge their cars in some hours. So people are buying generators, petrol generators, to charge their cars. So let me ask this a different way. Energy crisis, will it send us backwards in time? Well, the pandemic did, you know. It was not absolutely digital, but there were structures that were doing it physically. I'm talking about processes of publics and whatnot. I think that the need to save energy will make us continue to evolve in the sense of following the digital view. I think it will end up being, well, on the subject of the lack of energy, it's a matter of time. It will help us to continue in a path that the pandemic has forced, but now it's planned that kind of innovation. You spoke about getting back. Do you think there were processes that sent us back? Yes, companies who don't have, for example, physical channels, shops, banks, for example. For those who are not using digital channels, physical is not there anymore. Public services that are much, much worse because they did not do the transition to the digital and now they don't have the same support that they did of the physical side. So I think that we had some regression, yes. I would say that there is some confusion installed. We were forced to do a set of things. That's how we began. And there are things that we don't know how to manage. This is an example. The Phygital is very important. We don't want to kill everything that's physical because of the digital. No. The ideal context is to get the best of both worlds. Going to a restaurant, and that makes a lot of sense. If I see a menu on a QR code, a lot of people have a smartphone. Talking about some older people, they don't want to be subject to this. Someone wants to pay a meal, but they don't want to use a QR code, and to see a menu on a smartphone should not be forced to do it. Same as when we are going to an example that it's absolutely different. We are used to take digital meetings because they do avoid a lot of commuting. They make it much quicker. On the other hand, we are all at the office doing meetings on Teams, which doesn't make sense. Each one at their office, and we all have an office, and we are there without interacting, without communicating. So I think this is part of the context of adaptation. And well, having shops is very important. What about a menu? It's just on the cell phone. We don't have a physical menu, and now we all be in the meetings, and we all be at the office having digital meetings. I think that things are weird because we are not thinking about things anymore. Things change, so we are adapting to this hybrid reality. Sometimes things happen that don't make sense, so we need to go back to what was working before the pandemic, things that were blocked, and making the best of what the digital has to offer. So what we need is to take advantage of the best of both worlds. In terms of energy crisis, I think that we will have to rethink and accelerate. We have a proper example of our unit in Cacia. We have installed photovoltaic panels and 13% electric autonomy. I think that all these answers will dare us to think differently, to think on how, picking upon what you were saying in terms of California and the problem of California. We have a project with the island of Porto Santo. Porto Santo wishes to be the first smart fossil fuel island without fossil fuel, and we have a world prototype with the electric Zoe, which is the car from Renault. So we need to allocate infrastructures that when I get home with my Renault Zoe with a regular battery, 52 kilowatts or 20 kilowatts still charge, and then the car connects to the home and the car will feed the electric facility. So the house will consume the battery that I have in 20 kilowatts. It's more than enough for our houses for one evening. And in order to neutralize the impact on the grid, it will then connect itself and will recharge its battery. So this means to say that I think and I believe that these problems like the ones that we are experiencing now, everyone will need to dare think differently, trying to find new solutions of energy, of production, of savings, because that's what we have on the table. Yesterday I heard an example. In Spain, for example, we all are familiar and we need to have in our cars an emergency triangle, right? And now we are presenting in Portugal a system that already exists in Spain in force, and it will be mandatory in 2025, which is a light that you can put in your car, a signaling light, and it's connected to medical assistance, for example, just to tell you that it was unthinkable to we've lived with it so many years, but no, the fact is that it's just thinking about things. We always can find solutions that are possible to be implemented. And in terms of energy, I think there is a myriad of solutions that in the next few years will come about as a result of what we have experienced in the industry. And we understood that it was not a good idea. Europe has decentralized the energy pressure, and that's a problem too. We have no autonomy. All of this will make a quick acceleration to change the way that we see things, and there is a vast array of possibilities. If you have something else, please do. Just one detail. To combine digital with energy in a radical manner, 40% of energy from global data centers is coal. Coal. That is one of the greatest problems of the digital today. Even if those smartphones are made in a totally clean manner and are recharged in clean energy, almost everything that happens, 40% of coal. To clean this grid is absolutely pivotal. And it's very hard to do because not everyone has the conditions that we have in Brazil. So the greatest photovoltaic unit is in Brazil. Brazil has 75% of electric energy coming from hydraulics and wind. If we put more solar and biomass, it will get 85%. That's where we have oils, byproducts responsible for 15% decrease every year in the last 20 years. So we have a clean matrix because we have 8,500 kilometers abundant wind and a semi-desert, which is semi-arid of the northeast of Brazil, the so-called Nordeste, 350 days per year in most places with sun. So you have a clean grid. So there is a vast set of operations of investment in Brazil of storage, solar and wind energy that obviously will take a long time to do to export to Europe in the shape of green hydrogen. So I think that we have a great number of operations that will depend on fuel cells based on hydrogen. There are places in Africa and in Brazil and in Australia. Just one thing. Most of us are not aware of this. Each email that we save means 7 grams of CO2. So this thing that we need to realize that thinking that one email on our mailbox is something that pollutes. So we need to learn how to live differently, to understand that everything that we do has an impact on the society and on the environment. It's a trend that will last a long time. Thank you all. I would now open to the audience. I think that we have a roving microphone. Good afternoon. I'm Laerson from the University of Aveiro. Pleasure to be here. My question is this. Innovation is a non-linear phenomenon. And what Professor Sílvio was talking about the flows of we realizing this interactivity in terms of flows, it's quite challenging in terms of our mindset. As evolved as we might be, we are still connected to canons, to patterns. It's very focused on structures and in something that's ethereal that we usually don't know how to measure. When we talk about ecosystems, I ask people, well, is ecosystem a system? Is it a set of systems? An ecosystem is linear. So, when I'm talking something that it's linear, how can we talk about innovation? When we talk about the menu at the restaurant, if it is physical or not, that's a pattern by itself. When I go to the restaurant, I need to choose one of the dishes that are there. When I'm buying shoes, I need to choose a number and my foot is irregular. So we still live in this reality of a standardized society. Talking about disruption, my question is this. We are clearly evolving towards a society where standards, physical standards, will be overcome by an understanding of these energy flows, of knowledge, whatever. How do we get this basis of knowledge? How can we get ready for this new paradigm, if it's a paradigm? I don't know if I have an answer. What I would say, I would like to say that preparing to this adaptation, it's something that it's not directly connected to digitization, but the ability to pay attention and the ability to adapt and to get information and to keep it. We have less and less time of paying attention to whatever. We have more stimuli. So learning, whatever it is, we get information but we don't keep it. About standardization, it's another challenge. Sometimes not thinking about our audience. We had some examples that the trend is to be digital, but digitization cannot exclude the set of people that don't want to be digitalized, that want to find an alternative. And we know that those alternatives are mandatory, but I would say that this happens when we are not connected with the person that we are communicating with or to. This has to do with the experience of the client, how to do this, use this, what to do with if it was me, but not thinking about on the client who wants to go to the client who wants to have a physical manual, and this could be taken much longer in many other sectors and many other areas. I would say that the challenge is to think about digitizing something and changing a process and thinking on a new way of doing whatever, putting ourselves in the shoes of consumers and clients, although sometimes it's interesting to force changes because that's something that is positive for the planet, for people, for whatever, but without waving what the client wants or whomever. I don't know if I was able to answer, but here it is. This is what I would like to add. Well, that idea of shoes, this is the example that the industry has not reached close to what we could call mass customization, and I have no expectation of getting it in the short run. And so your question ends with something that it's much more radical on how to learn how to deal with these flows, with this dynamic that are being installed in society and economy. 3, 4 decades, we have a crisis that it's much more severe because these processes of learning that existed from a point of view of questioning, of discovery, in Plato and Aristoteles, they were transformed. And education is the bureaucracy of learning. So instead of us learning, we are taught as if we were pets of society. And we are taught by the educational system, bearing some exceptions throughout the country, repeating what has been done before. So it would be very hard for you to create something that is prepared for the future in a society that teaches whatever has been done before, because that's the standard, that's the gold standard that everyone needs to pay tribute to. So that's why educational processes are assessed. In Porto Digital, we have a school, Cesar School, which works based on problems, based on teams, based on the development. The school publishes calls with their problems that are used to bring curricular components in from within the laboratory, all rooms in terms of learning and not teaching. And then you turn it upside down, but we do need to bring it into the regulatory system. And that process of education, so it was licensed to do something and they do a different one. So we need to prove that the result corresponds to the result of the first one. Cesar School has thus been assessed as one of the 5 best schools in Brazil, following the metrics of the official system. Our students need to also go through the repetition of the established truth, which is the traditional standard of teaching. Good afternoon. A question to the gentleman representing Renault. You spoke about versatility of getting home, connecting the car to our home system, and the car battery will feed which is a time where more energy is being consumed around the country. Let me ask you, you have this system of buying the car and then you rent the battery. Is it that Renault doesn't know how many kilowatts or how long the battery has been feeding, and won't they charge an extra for it? Because the car has a duration that was feeding the car, but then there is an external part. Won't that influence it? No, because Renault is a pioneer in electric mobility, and when we started selling electric cars, it was just like you said. You would buy the car and you would rent the batteries. That solution is not working anymore. When we buy the car, the batteries belong to the owner of the car. So what I have to say about this, to fight some of the stigma that are connected with charging and recharging, I told you about the example of Porto Santo, and they showed us something that we are using there. Batteries in the second cycle of life that we took from cars who had less than 70% of their capacity, and we connected them to photovoltaic panels in order to store it, which is a solution that will be used in many houses. In Portugal, according to the census, 67% of of houses of people who are in dwellings, because we live in the urban centers, but we do forget what's around. But to tell you that that will be a solution, just to bust the myth of that batteries are not recyclable, that they are toxic, but essentially, and going to answer your question, it is proved, and Porto showed us that the battery, that not even the engineers, because this is very new. This is a time of knowledge. We are just getting to understand how things work. The battery, oddly enough, according to engineers, they found a very obvious solution. It started getting an ability because it's subject to a cycle, and it damages the batteries of the car. Is fast charges that subjected to extreme heat. When we're talking about home charging, either we do it with a conventional 2.4 kilowatts or 3.7 if it's a green app, or with a wall box that can go to 7.4 or 11 an hour. If I stop and I go to Lisbon and I charge at 130 kilowatts, it's very different, 2 or 3 or 130. We are talking about, it's a 40-fold multiplication. So the heat that the battery is subject to, that's why many of the claims that have come to public with in terms of the quick degradation of batteries in cars is associated, I mean, not always, but usually it is associated to Uber or users of platforms of the like, because if they stop, they're losing money. So they usually charge their cars with fast charges, which leads to, and this is in his exclusion of warranty clauses, the fact that when I buy my car, if I charge it too many times in quick charges or fast charges, the battery will not have warranty anymore. And or in the scenario that you were talking about, which is a huge bad usage, and with a paradigm with Altice, we are used to not paying per minute, but there is a clause that I think that it still exists today, that if we don't have a responsible usage within the design pattern, we will be penalized by it. And if you want, that's what happens with car batteries, because the client knows that he should not go to 2 or 3 fast charges per day because the battery will be ruined. Thank you. If I could add something, you said something very interesting. Phygital depends on the massive provision of data about our lives, and then people bring these constraints. AI will improve services, but also business models, companies that need to, if I'm not selling 1 million cars per year, I need to have a digital business model that allows us to win more. Altice and Renault don't want to be paid less, they want to be paid more. And it ends up sometimes not allowing the study of digital models. Now, for example, China is the most advanced country in AI, no question, because there are no restrictions of access to data. The state has access to all data. So machine learning, AI, it's quickly developed. We didn't address this. We could have a whole conference about it. But it's quite worrying in terms of Phygital. We all sign with the digital mobile key. I need to be sure that no one will sign on my behalf. Bringing both things together, the car could decide that he will not be charged at the same speed that the car wants. That should be an imposition from the factory, not charging at that speed. If you bring a bit more AI to the game or product as a service, you will have a car that it's only available certain hours a day, or just to go to certain places. There's a sci-fi story written by the scientists who created the notion of singularity called Rainbow's End. And there, all cars are self-driving. and there is a rally in the center of the city, and people want to get there. And then the city brings an order to self-driving cars that they cannot get less than 5 kilometers. So those who want to go, they need to walk 5 kilometers because cars aren't going there. So there are additional problems when we transform products and services that Renault could protect the cars, penalizing the citizens, or selling a car saying that this is a car, you can only use it a few hours a day. That's what you do with airplane turbines. Turbines can only work a few hours a day. They might want to fly for 24 hours, but it's not possible. It will only fly for a few hours a day. I don't know if there is any other questions. Good afternoon. Let me thank you because I really enjoyed your answer. I came here with a whole different idea, maybe because of the phygital world in the industry, but I really enjoyed. Let me congratulate you all. My question is, what is the limitation that you see pertaining one point that has been discussed here, which is losing privacy as human beings? Well, I'm not answering your question, but well, as I said before, last week I was with the connected systems engineer, and she was telling me that it's a reality. We are all worried with data protection, and she was telling, but no one cares having a robot, a Roomba at home done by the Chinese, and they monitor your entire house and they get a clear portrait of your house. It's what we were talking about, the Chinese, and this is the war of the century maybe, is the access to data and the way that it is managed in Europe. I would say that we protect data a lot. China, for all reasons that we are aware of, not for the state because they want to know everything about us and they limit us on everything. I think that that balance will be the next challenge. That's why I started by saying that I don't have the answer, but it's a very peculiar aspect of Roomba or Roombas, and it maps people's house and the information is there. We don't know what they will do with it, but here's a challenge to our colleagues to see if they have a better answer than mine. I don't have an answer. I have an opinion. I met someone who was saying that she was afraid of vacuum cleaners. Well, I don't want a vacuum cleaner that works by itself. I'm afraid of it. Well, the issue here is that we are already protecting data. They are protected um, as much as possible. In order to enjoy everything that the digital has to bring to us, and I think that everything that we have been discussing brings a lot of advantages, but we will not control exposure. Because I might decide not giving my data to almost anyone, but that means that I will not enjoy everything that the digital has to give me, regardless. Gaming, social media, industry. We have companies that have my data, but at a certain point, I need to live almost out of the real context of things. So I think that we are lucky enough to have a lot of protection. But it's like living, right? We are subject to life, to what might happen, of everything good, and to all the risks also. So I would say that the digital is a bit like that. I can protect myself, the way that I drive, the way that I walk, the way that I get dressed. All of that has a set of advantages, but it doesn't prevent everything that can happen. We need to pay attention, we need to be careful, but the risk is still there. It's very hard to answer that question because it's so different that the answer goes from forget about it because there's no way to solve it, or let's find a system that it's so difficult that you cannot do anything. Brazil is an environment. If you get the data launching in Brazil of the state, data of the health system, in Brazil, for example, there was a leak of all the drivers in Brazil. When I say all, it's all, from the president to everyone, the name, the address, the phone number, but then all data of everyone who took the vaccines. That's 85% of the Brazilian population. Then there's two banks of the debt system of people. So in the underworld of the digital crime, there is a profusion of data that we can identify to the minimum detail, including the income statement. So we are not worried about there anymore. In Europe, you have 3 laws, and there will be a 4th one managing the digital area, the GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulation, about data, Digital Markets Act, about markets, and the Digital Services Act. And there will be, this is being debated, a law on the transparency of algorithms, not just data, but algorithms. So it is possible for you to have a digital market that's broad, that's profound, and protecting the data of people, but you need to create new areas of this market. I see as unavoidable. This is business that's specialized in data. And if I have to do this exhibition with Altice, anyone like Renault will ask me if I let them use the data to fund the car. They are neither with me or with Renault. It's just with that intermediary. They cannot access data directly. They need to ask about it in order for it to answer. They have a history of traffic accidents with victims. Is there a history of high velocity? Do they pay their funding on the similar? So we won't say what the income is, but we need to say if you need to pay what they are paying, which is an indirect answer. These data intermediaries and the restriction to a few agents that are specialized in it, because the truth is that most companies don't have the human capacity of managing the cycle of life of business, and they don't have the ability to protect data because it's quite expensive, it's very hard, extremely sophisticated and vulnerable. They will end up establishing as the only repositories to whom I can give my data to. That's not the case today in any country, because governments, they themselves, as sophisticated as they are, they don't have the ability to protect data. But we will get there. So I think that we can be prepared for a new agent, which is the data intermediary. Thank you all. If there are no further questions, I would like to hereby close our session. We have a closing speech, but we will end here. Thank you all. We would like to bring on stage the Councilman João Machado. Very quickly, let me just thank our speakers, our moderator. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Sílvio. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Pedro. I do apologize for not being here on time, but the morning session ended up quite late, so I was just here for the end. And it was very philosophical. So let me just tell you that we, Câmara de Aveiro, we have been doing something in the field of digitization. 2 years ago, before the pandemic, parents had to go to the city to charge their cards for the meals of their kids, but that was solved in less than a month. So we have been doing a set of progress, being in progress of in the city, done differently, and other services that we have digitalized. I think that the mayor already spoke about this in the opening session, but one of the great things of our mandate, for which there are still 3 years to go, is the usage of a card, a single digital card that will allow to access a set of services via a physical card for those who don't have it. And that will be unique for school meals, it will be unique for the municipal swimming pool, to access the bugas. It is a card that will allow that we have public services and private at hand in a way that's simplified, very comfortable for our end client, that is actually the thinking about our habitants, but also many others. Without further ado, I would like to thank our speakers, see you around, and have a nice tech week. Thank you.